I still remember the sound of the screen door slamming behind me. Not the actual sound, but the way it echoed in my head like punctuation, final and loud. I didn't have a suitcase, just a half-charged phone, a backpack with a few shirts, and a sour taste in my mouth that I now recognize as betrayal. My name is Henry, and I was 18 the night my parents kicked me out. I didn't get into trouble. I didn't crash a car or fail school or sneak around. What I did do, apparently, was commit the unpardonable sin of not being my brother. My brother, Caleb, was 2 years younger than me, but acted like he was 10 years older. He always had that smug, I already know the answer kind of look. The kind of kid teachers fawned over and relatives praised at dinner parties for knowing how to shake hands firmly. The golden child. And me? I was the kid who made his own dinner by 10 and stopped asking for help with homework because no one ever looked up from their phones long enough to notice I was struggling. I used to think maybe I was just quieter. Maybe I didn't shine as bright. Maybe that's why they never offered me anything unless Caleb was getting double. But looking back now, I don't think it was about how loud I was or how hard I worked. I think they just made up their minds early on that Caleb was the one who'd carry the family name, who'd succeed and make them proud. I was Plan B. And when you believe Plan A is guaranteed, you start seeing Plan B as unnecessary clutter. It wasn't always like this. When I was younger, 8, maybe 9, I still remember my dad taking me out for ice cream, just the two of us. He let me pick the flavor, paid extra for the waffle cone. We sat on a park bench while he told me how smart I was, how I'd do great things. That was the last time I remember him looking at me like I mattered. Caleb was only 6 then, still too little to compete. Once he caught up, I faded out of focus. The shift wasn't sudden. It was gradual, like watching water boil if you're not paying attention. First, it was Caleb getting new clothes while mine came from clearance racks or hand-me-downs from a cousin I barely knew. Then it was him getting out of chores because he had to study. Then my room, my tiny sanctuary, started to feel like a guest room whenever Caleb needed something. Henry, can Caleb use your desk? His isn't big enough. Henry, can Caleb keep his fish tank in here for a few weeks? Henry, you're almost out of the house anyway. I kept quiet. I thought maybe if I didn't make waves, they'd see me, appreciate me. I stayed out of trouble, pulled decent grades, got a part-time job at 16 to pay for my own clothes. I was applying to colleges behind their backs, hoping to surprise them with an acceptance letter and prove that I was worth investing in too. My guidance counselor, Mrs. Delaney, said I had a real shot at a couple of schools if I could land a scholarship or some parental support. I knew we weren't rich, but we weren't poor either. My grandfather had left a fund for college when he passed, specifically earmarked for Henry and any future siblings. I didn't know how much was in it. I just knew it existed. I thought it would help cover what I couldn't. The day it all began to truly unravel was 3 weeks after I turned 18. I came home from my shift at the bookstore to find Caleb sitting on my bed. Not near it. On it. Shoes on. Headphones in. Laptop open. He looked up like I was the one intruding. I told him to get out. He said Mom told him he could crash in here until further notice. I laughed. Thought it was a joke. It wasn't. Mom walked by, saw the door open, and said, "Oh, Henry, we're rearranging the rooms. Since you'll be moving out soon anyway, Caleb's going to take your room. You'll sleep in the den until you figure out your next steps." I just blinked at her. No discussion. No warning. Just evicted. I asked what she meant by next steps, and she said, "Well, college, or work, or whatever it is you're planning. You're 18 now." Like she was reminding me of a bill I forgot to pay. I tried not to panic. Maybe it was temporary. Maybe they just wanted to help Caleb focus. He had SATs coming up, right? I moved my stuff into the den, barely enough room for a mattress on the floor. My dad didn't say anything, just nodded like it made perfect sense. "Gotta make sacrifices for the future," he said. I didn't realize at the time he wasn't talking about Caleb sacrificing. He meant me. A week later, I found out Caleb had taken my car. Not borrowed it. Taken it. My old Civic that I'd worked on all summer 2 years back, replacing the tires, patching the seats, saving for new speakers. My name was on the paperwork from when I bought it used off my manager's cousin. Except somehow, my dad had transferred the title to Caleb for insurance reasons. I stood in the driveway watching Caleb back out, music blaring, while Mom told me I didn't need a car since I wasn't going anywhere. That's when it clicked. The car, the room, the tone in their voices when they spoke to me. I wasn't part of the plan anymore. I was excess weight they were trimming. The final nail came 2 nights later during dinner. My parents had opened a bottle of wine, rare in our house, and were celebrating. I asked what the occasion was. Mom looked over her glass and said, "We just finalized everything for Caleb's college plan. Early admission to Wilmore, and we're putting Grandpa's fund toward it. All of it." I dropped my fork. Literally. I didn't even mean to. I just froze. "All of it?" I asked. My voice sounded weird, like it wasn't mine. "The fund Grandpa left for both of us." Dad shrugged like it was no big deal. "You're an adult now. You'll figure it out. Caleb's future is more structured, more promising. He's our best chance." I stood up. My legs felt shaky. "So that's it. I get nothing? After everything?" Mom didn't even look ashamed, just exasperated. "Henry, don't make this into a scene. You should have applied for more scholarships. Caleb needs this. You'll manage." I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just nodded slowly, turned around, and walked to the den. I didn't sleep that night. I stared at the ceiling and waited for morning. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but I knew I couldn't stay. So at 6 a.m., before anyone else was awake, I packed what little I had into my backpack, unplugged my half-charged phone, and walked out the door. No note. No goodbyes. What I didn't know back then was that walking away would be the first step towards something much bigger, something they never saw coming. Something Caleb, of all people, would have to face years later, when he walked into a job interview and saw me sitting across the table, smiling. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you what happened after I left. Because things didn't get easier. In fact, they got so much worse before they got better. The morning air bit through my hoodie as I stood at the bus stop, breath fogging in front of me, hands shoved deep in my pockets. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay. My half-charged phone blinked at 42%, no charger in my bag, and I had maybe $30 in crumpled bills from my last shift at the bookstore. That was it. 18 years old, kicked out by my own family like I was some squatter overstaying my welcome. I tried calling my friend Jonah, but it went to voicemail. Twice. His parents were strict about phones at night, and I didn't blame him for not picking up. So I just got on the next bus out of town. Didn't even look at the route. I figured I'd ride until I saw something that didn't make me feel like I was choking. That first night, I slept behind a 24-hour laundromat, curled up behind the dryers where it was slightly warmer. I used my backpack as a pillow and my hoodie as a blanket. It wasn't the worst night of my life, but it was the loneliest. I kept playing my parents' words over and over in my head. Caleb is our best chance. You'll figure it out. Don't make this into a scene. Like I was some side character in my own life story, getting written out without a proper goodbye. I spent the next few weeks couch surfing. Jonah came through after a day and offered me his garage. It was cramped, full of old bikes and boxes, but I had a roof and access to an outlet. That outlet became my lifeline. I started looking for work right away, anything to keep me busy, to keep me from thinking. I landed a gig at a hardware store 2 towns over, commuting an hour each way by bus. It didn't pay much, but I worked like a man possessed. Stocked shelves, loaded pallets, cleaned spills without being asked. The manager, Dale, noticed. He offered me extra hours, and soon I was working weekends too. Meanwhile, Jonah's parents didn't mind me staying, for a while. But they had their own lives, and it was clear I was just a guest. I cleaned the garage every other day and paid for my own food, even tossed some money toward the electric bill. Still, after a couple months, Jonah pulled me aside and said, "Hey man, my mom's starting to ask questions. I think you got to start looking for a real place." I didn't blame him. I just nodded. Yeah, I get it. By spring, I had saved enough for a shared apartment with 2 other guys I met through work. They were older, messy, and smoked too much indoors, but rent was cheap and no one cared where I came from. I picked up night shifts unloading trucks and started taking free online classes during the day. I found a rhythm. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. That year taught me more than high school ever did. How to live cheap. How to budget down to the cent. How to keep pushing even when every bone in your body says sleep. I learned how to fix broken things, sinks, fridges, microwaves, and eventually started taking small repair jobs for extra cash. I told myself I'd build something from the ground up. Not for revenge. Not yet. Just to prove to myself I could. And then came the email. It was almost a year after I left home. I was sitting on the balcony of our crappy apartment, eating cold noodles straight from the container, when I saw it. The subject line read, "Urgent, family matter." It was from my mom. I stared at it for a long time. My thumb hovered over the delete button. But curiosity got the better of me. Henry, I know things ended badly, but we need to talk. Your father's job was downsized, and we're in a bit of a difficult place financially. Caleb is trying to focus on school, but the tuition is overwhelming. I know you've always been independent, and we admire that. But if you're in a position to help your brother get through this semester, it would mean a lot to the family. Let's put the past behind us. We're still your parents. Love, Mom. I laughed. Actually laughed out loud. The same people who shoved me out like garbage were now asking for help? After a year of silence? After taking my room, my car, and my college fund? I didn't reply. I wanted to. I wanted to craft the perfect response that would twist the knife. But I decided silence would be louder. They tried a few more times. Dad left a voicemail, stiff and awkward. Mom emailed again with phrases like, "We've all made mistakes, and Caleb's really struggling." Still, I didn't respond. But that's not the betrayal I'm here to talk about. No, that came 6 months later when I got a letter in the mail. A thick, official-looking envelope addressed to Mr. Henry L. Carmichael, my full name, which I hadn't seen in print since high school. The return address said Camden Law Offices. My heart dropped. I opened it slowly, and inside was a formal notice. My parents had filed for control over the remaining balance of my grandfather's trust fund. The same one they claimed had already been used up. Confused, I reread it twice. Then a third time. It said there was still a portion left, about $17,000, untouched, under my name. But my parents were petitioning the court to gain temporary custodial access over the funds for educational and familial support purposes. It was dated a month ago. They hadn't told me about it. Hadn't asked. They were trying to legally access money that wasn't even theirs. I called the number listed at the bottom. The paralegal on the other end confirmed everything. The account was still active but had been frozen pending the court hearing. My parents were claiming I had abandoned the family and that they should be granted temporary control of the funds for Caleb's continued education at Wilmore University. I was floored. Abandon the family? After they kicked me out? It felt like being slapped with an open hand after already getting punched in the gut. I asked what my options were, and the paralegal said flatly, "You have every right to contest this, but you'll need to show up in court and provide proof that the funds were intended for you and that you're capable of managing them." I hung up, sat there on the balcony with the letter in my lap, and stared out over the rooftops of the city. The skyline looked like a row of cracked teeth. All I could think was, they're still trying to take from me. Even now, even after everything. I didn't have a lawyer. I couldn't afford one. But I had time. I had paperwork. Old bank statements, school records, even a handwritten note from my grandfather congratulating me on my high school graduation with a line that read, "Hope this helps with your college dreams, Henry." I spent the next 3 weeks preparing. Every spare moment, every break at work, every late night, I was scanning documents, organizing folders, researching family trust laws. Jonah helped too. He even got his uncle, who was a retired attorney, to look over my statement before I filed it with the court. The day of the hearing, I wore the one button-down shirt I owned and showed up early. My parents were already there, sitting in the hallway outside the courtroom. Dad looked older, tired. Mom wore her church blazer and a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Caleb wasn't with them. When she saw me, her face twisted into something between surprise and irritation. "You came," she said. I looked her dead in the eye. "Of course I did. It's my name on the trust." Dad said nothing. Inside the courtroom, I sat across from them while the judge read over the statements. My hands were sweating, but my voice was steady. I told the truth. I told them everything, about being kicked out, about the car, the room, the silent treatment. I handed over my documents, including the note from Grandpa. Mom tried to play the victim. She cried, said I misunderstood, that they were protecting the family's future. The judge listened quietly, asked questions, took notes. It wasn't a long hearing, but it felt like it stretched on forever. At the end, the judge ruled in my favor. The trust would remain under my control. My parents had no legal claim. They didn't even look at me when it was over. I walked out of that courthouse not just with the funds intact, but with something more, a sense of power I'd never felt before. They couldn't take from me anymore. But I wasn't done. See, that betrayal, the one where they tried to take my last safety net and call it family support, it lit a fire in me. I realized they wouldn't stop unless I stopped them. unless I made it clear, once and for all, that I wasn't the weak, expendable one they thought I was. So I started planning. And that plan, it would take 4 more years, a whole lot of growth, and one perfectly timed job posting. Because someday soon, Caleb would be walking into an interview room thinking his life was finally coming together, and he'd see me sitting there across the table, holding his future in my hands. But I'll tell you how we got there next. After the court hearing, you'd think I'd be riding high, like some underdog who'd finally punched back. But life doesn't hand out neat little victories wrapped in bows. It just keeps going, indifferent to whether you're winning or barely hanging on. Sure, I walked out with control of the trust fund still intact. But let me be clear, that money wasn't some golden ticket. It wasn't enough to buy a new life. Not in this economy. And I didn't touch it. Not yet. I told myself it was off limits. Not until I had a real plan. I'd seen too many people burn through a windfall like it was monopoly money. I refused to be one of them. And yet, the emotional damage didn't vanish with the legal win. In fact, it sank deeper. My parents hadn't just tried to rob me. They tried to rewrite the story entirely. Abandon the family. That phrase haunted me. It was in their court filing, plain as day. And it stuck, like I was some runaway child who chose the streets over Sunday dinners. Never mind the reality, that they threw me out without a second thought and tried to take everything afterward. That winter was brutal. My 2 roommates moved out without warning. One ghosted us after getting arrested on a DUI, and the other just left a note on the fridge, got a better gig. Sorry. Which left me scrambling to cover rent I couldn't afford alone. I took extra shifts, borrowed cash from Jonah, which I hated doing, and stopped buying groceries that didn't come in bulk. There were days I ate instant oatmeal for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Days when I showered with cold water because the heater broke and the landlord vanished. Nights when I'd lie in bed fully clothed, wrapped in 2 thrift store blankets, because the windows leaked and the draft made my fingers go numb. But I kept going. I didn't complain. I didn't whine to Jonah or text Caleb some bitter paragraph. I just existed, quietly. And during those quiet nights, I started planning. Not revenge. Not at first. Just survival. I began stashing away every extra dollar I could. Took small electronics repair jobs under the table. Laptops, phones, game consoles. I started getting decent at it. Watching YouTube tutorials and learning by doing. I'd solder motherboards under a $15 desk lamp and tape cracked screens back together with steady hands. Word spread. Some weeks, I made more fixing tech than I did stocking shelves. That skill gave me an idea. There was a community college across the city offering a 2-year certification in IT systems and network security. The cost wasn't crazy, and they offered night classes, perfect for someone working during the day. I took a bus out there one Thursday after my shift and walked the halls like I already belonged. I picked up a pamphlet, read it front to back. It was the first time in a long time I felt hopeful. But I hesitated. Not because I didn't believe in myself. By then, I knew I could grind through anything. I hesitated because I didn't want to use their money. The trust fund. Every time I looked at that untouched amount in my account, I heard my mom's voice. Caleb deserves it more. Using it felt like borrowing poison. But the truth was, that money was mine. Grandpa left it for me. Not for Caleb's tuition. Not for Mom's emergency wine nights or Dad's failed stock trades. For me. And maybe, just maybe, it was time I stopped pretending I didn't deserve help. So I applied. I registered for the spring semester. Paid the tuition using a small chunk of the trust. Bought a used laptop with some repair credit and a few online coupons. The day my student email account activated, I stared at the screen for a long time. Not because I was proud, but because I didn't recognize the person who made it this far. Not the kid they kicked out. Not the quiet older brother always giving up space. Someone new. But life wasn't done testing me. 2 weeks into my first semester, Jonah got into a car crash. He was okay, just some bruised ribs and a busted wrist, but he couldn't work for a month. His parents, kind as they were, asked me if I could help out with errands. Groceries, bills, rides to appointments. I didn't hesitate. Of course I said yes. Jonah had housed me in his garage when no one else would even return my texts. I owed him more than I could ever repay. What I didn't expect was what came next. One afternoon, I was picking up groceries for his mom, basic stuff. Eggs, milk, bread, when I ran into my dad. At the store, he was standing in the produce aisle, thumbing through avocados like nothing had happened. wearing a sweater I recognized, one I'd gotten him for Father's Day back in middle school. He looked tired. Not homeless tired, but worn down, like life had taken a few swings at him and finally connected. He looked up, caught my eye, and froze. For a second, we just stared at each other. Neither of us moved. Then he said, "Henry." Not hey, not son, not how are you. Just my name. I nodded. "Dad." An awkward pause. He cleared his throat. "You look older." I didn't know what to say to that. I wanted to snap back. That's what happens when you kick your kid out and he has to grow up overnight. But I didn't. He gestured vaguely toward my cart. "Helping your friend's family?" "Yeah," I said. "Like a real family would." He winced. "Just barely." But I caught it. Then, out of nowhere, he said, "We didn't know what we were doing back then. Things were stressful." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because that's what he went with. A blanket excuse like I was some employee let go during budget cuts. He kept talking. "Your mother, she misses you. She won't say it, but she does." I didn't reply. He looked at me like he wanted something. I saw it in his eyes, that tiny glint of hope that maybe, just maybe, I'd throw him a rope. That maybe I still had a sun-shaped hole in my heart that he could crawl back into. But I didn't give him the satisfaction. Instead, I asked, "How's Caleb?" The moment I said it, I regretted it. Not because I cared, but because I didn't want to give them any part of me. Not even my curiosity. Dad sighed. "He's having a tough time. Switched majors twice. Lost his scholarship last semester. He's not sure what he wants." I shrugged. Sounds like a problem for his parents to solve. Dad opened his mouth like he was about to argue, then closed it again. He looked older in that moment than I'd ever seen him. Like the weight of his choices had finally settled on his shoulders. "Well," he muttered, "it was good seeing you." I didn't respond. He walked away, leaving behind the scent of cologne and something sour. Regret, maybe. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I felt guilty, but because that encounter shook me more than I wanted to admit. I kept replaying his voice in my head, trying to decipher what he really meant. Was it remorse? Manipulation? A mix of both? I didn't know. I still don't. But I doubled down on school after that. I studied harder, took on every repair job I could find, and slowly, inch by inch, I built something that looked like a future. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was stacking bricks. My professors noticed. One of them, Mr. Kwan, took me aside after class one day and said, "You ever thought about internships? I know a guy who works in corporate IT. Big firm. Might be a good fit." I blinked. "Seriously?" He nodded. "You've got the drive. And the story." I hesitated. "I don't want charity." "It's not charity," he said. "It's opportunity. You've earned it." So I sent him my resume. Cleaned it up, added my repair business, my coursework, my GPA, which was shockingly good. I didn't expect much. But a week later, I got an email. "We'd love to schedule an interview." It was a junior IT analyst position at a financial tech company downtown. Nothing glamorous, but it paid decent and had potential. I showed up early, wore my only blazer, brought copies of my resume on real paper, sat in the waiting area with sweaty palms, and tried not to bounce my leg too much. And when they called my name, I stood up, shook hands, and walked into the interview room. That's when I saw him, sitting across the table, dressed in a navy suit, holding a clipboard. My brother, Caleb. He looked up, and his smile vanished. But I'm not going to tell you what happened next. Not yet. Because before that moment, before the tables truly turned, there was one more thing I haven't told you. Something Caleb did. Something I didn't find out until right before that interview. The real betrayal. And once I learned it, everything changed. Not just how I saw him, but how I saw myself, and what I knew I had to do next. Caleb's eyes went wide the second he saw me across that interview table, and for a fleeting moment, I couldn't tell if the emotion behind them was confusion, guilt, or fear. He hadn't seen me in years. Not since the day I walked out with a half-charged phone and a backpack full of shirts. Not since the courtroom, where he didn't even bother to show up. I watched him blink once, twice, then subtly glance at the nameplate in front of me, as if to confirm what his gut was already screaming. Henry Carmichael, Junior IT Hiring Manager. I offered the most professional smile I could manage. Polished. Neutral. Just enough warmth to keep it professional, but not enough to erase the years that sat between us. "Next candidate, please," I said, motioning to the empty chair. He sat down like a man walking into a firing squad. But before we get to what happened in that room, let me rewind. Because the story isn't about the moment I got even. It's about the climb it took to get there. After that encounter with my dad in the grocery store, something shifted. Maybe it was the bitterness still lingering in my chest. Maybe it was the reminder that I was doing better, that I had come this far without anyone's help. Either way, I stopped waiting for closure. I stopped hoping they'd wake up one day and feel sorry. I let go of that fantasy the same way I'd let go of childhood drawings and baseball trophies, with quiet finality. School started picking up fast. I finished my first semester with straight A's. Then the next. I turned out to be better at IT than I ever expected. Systems made sense to me. Problems had solutions. And I wasn't afraid of hard work. I took extra certifications, CompTIA, Cisco networking, even a bit of Python automation on the side. I consumed information like a man starving. And the internship? It turned into a job. They brought me on as a full-time junior tech specialist once I finished my second year. My salary wasn't glamorous, but it was solid. More than anything I'd ever seen growing up. I found a clean apartment, tiny, but mine, and bought a decent used car that didn't smell like stale fast food. For the first time in my life, I could breathe. But I didn't stop there. I kept learning. Every night, after work, I logged into online classes, studied project management, cybersecurity protocols, data infrastructure. I networked at meetups, asked questions, stayed late to shadow the senior analysts. I built a professional website with a portfolio of the systems I'd optimized and the network diagrams I'd designed. I helped redesign our department's internal workflow, reducing our ticket backlog by 32% in 3 months. Word spread, and then I got promoted. IT project coordinator, then assistant manager. Within 3 years of walking out of my parents' house with a dead phone, I was leading a team of analysts, managing infrastructure upgrades, and overseeing intern onboarding. You know what the funny thing is? I still hadn't touched most of the trust fund. Sure, I'd used a little for school, but the majority of it stayed untouched. I didn't need it anymore. I was doing fine without it. That money was no longer a lifeline. It was leverage, and I was saving it, just in case. I still never spoke to my parents. Occasionally, I'd get emails from unknown accounts with vague subject lines like, "Hope you're well," or "Let's talk." I never opened them. Jonah did some digging once and found a Facebook post from my mom asking for prayers for a son who lost his way. The comments were filled with people offering sympathy and suggesting forgiveness. I didn't comment. I didn't even scroll. But Caleb? Caleb never reached out. Not once. Until the company I worked for started opening up entry-level positions in our partner branch. A new location, fresh team, young hires. And guess who was trying to get in the door? I found out not through Caleb directly, but through HR. We were vetting candidates for the upcoming round of junior analysts, and I recognized the name immediately. Caleb Carmichael. It hit me like a bucket of cold water. At first, I thought it had to be a coincidence. But the resume confirmed it. Same birth date, same hometown. Even listed Wilmore University, although he'd failed to note the gap years. I called in a favor from an old contact on campus and found out he never finished his degree. Dropped out halfway through his junior year. No formal explanation, just vanished. Apparently, life without constant handouts had been harder than he expected. He was applying through open channels now, chasing any opportunity he could. And our company? It had prestige. It was the kind of place that looked good on paper. The kind of place someone might apply to just to say they were doing something important. I stared at his resume for a long time. Then I asked to sit in on the interview. "Is there a reason?" my boss asked. "You're not usually in first rounds." I smiled. "Just want to make sure we're hiring people who know how to take initiative." He shrugged. "All yours." And that's how Caleb ended up walking into that conference room and seeing me sitting across from him. The rise wasn't flashy. There were no fireworks, no dramatic montages. It happened slowly, through tired mornings and late-night studying, through rejection emails and client escalations, through fixing other people's messes and staying silent when my credit got passed off to someone else. But eventually, people noticed. My name started circulating on promotion shortlists. Clients requested me by name. My team grew, and one day, the head of our department called me into her office and said, "You've got an eye for detail. You ever thought about managing recruitment?" I hadn't. But I said yes, because I knew one day, he'd come knocking. And here we were. He sat across from me, his posture slowly straightening, his palms resting on the table like he was trying to appear calm. But his eyes betrayed him. I could see it, the thousand thoughts racing behind them. I gave nothing away. "Let's begin," I said. But even as I launched into the first question, part of me was flashing back. Not to the betrayal or the den or the car, but to something I found just a few weeks before the interview. Something that changed everything. I was cleaning out an old email account, one I hadn't checked in years, the same one I used in high school. I was deleting spam, unsubscribing from useless newsletters, when I found it. An email. From Caleb. Dated 6 months before I got kicked out. Subject line, private. I clicked on it out of curiosity, and what I read made my blood run cold. It was a forwarded message, my college acceptance letter, the one I never received. And under it, a short message from Caleb to my mom. "Should I delete this, or do you want to?" That's when I knew. They didn't just favor Caleb. They actively sabotaged me. I sat there, staring at that message for a long time, trying to wrap my head around the fact that Caleb had intercepted my acceptance letter, maybe logged into my account when I forgot to log out, and sent it to our mom so they could get rid of it. And they had. I never saw that acceptance. I never even knew the school had replied. I thought I'd been rejected, that I wasn't good enough. But I was. I just never got the chance. That email changed everything. Not just how I saw them, but how I saw myself. For years, I thought I was second-rate. Not quite smart enough. Not quite impressive enough. But I'd been robbed of the starting line. And now here he was, sitting in front of me, looking for a job. And I held the keys. But this wasn't going to be some explosive revenge story. No desk flipping, no dramatic shouting match. That wasn't my style anymore. Because the best kind of power? It's quiet. It's patient. It's earned. And as I reached for Caleb's resume and asked him to walk me through his work experience, I knew exactly how this interview was going to end. But not in the way he thought. Because I wasn't just there to deny him. I was there to show him exactly what it felt like. To chase something, to want it desperately, and to realize that someone else already made the decision long before you walked through the door. But we'll get to that soon. First, I wanted to hear him squirm. Tell me his story. Explain his hardships. And maybe, just maybe, I'd let him know that I knew. That the email wasn't lost. It was saved. And it was going to be the final nail in the coffin he built for himself. Caleb cleared his throat and sat up straighter, trying to regain his composure as I tapped the tip of my pen lightly against the corner of his resume. "So," I said, casually flipping the paper, "walk me through your work history, starting with your most recent role." He opened his mouth, closed it, then forced a polite smile. "All right. Well, after I left school, I did some freelance tech support. Small stuff. Home networks, software setup, that sort of thing. I worked for a startup for about 6 months, but they shut down. Most recently, I've been helping a family friend with IT security. Contract-based. It was vague, purposefully vague, and I knew it. He'd padded the timeline, stretched short gigs to cover multi-month gaps, glossed over the dropout. The family friend was probably just someone who let him reset a router and call it penetration testing. Still, I nodded. "Interesting. Why'd you leave Wilmore?" He froze again, a flicker of something in his eyes. "Shame? Resentment?" "I realized the program wasn't aligned with my goals," he said carefully. "Felt like I was wasting time on outdated material. I wanted more hands-on experience." Translation, he flunked out or gave up. But I let it slide. "For now?" I murmured, flipping to the next page in his application. "Can you tell me about a time you had to handle a difficult technical issue under pressure?" He gave me a pre-rehearsed answer about a Wi-Fi outage and a frustrated client. Something low-stakes and unimpressive. I barely listened. I was watching him, watching the sweat form at his temple, the way his fingers twitched near the cuff of his shirt. He wasn't sweating because he was nervous about the job. He was sweating because he was starting to remember. I glanced at the digital clock on the wall. We were 10 minutes in, time to shift gears. "So," I said, setting the paper down, "before we wrap, I want to talk to you about company culture." He blinked. "Sure. In this department, integrity is everything. Trust, accountability, respect. We don't just hire skill, we hire people we can count on. People who understand that honesty matters, even when no one's watching." He nodded slowly, sensing the weight behind the words, but not sure where it was going. I leaned forward. "And while reviewing your application, I did a little background check. Nothing too deep. Just connecting dots." I opened my laptop. He leaned in slightly, curious. Then I clicked, and up popped the email. Should I delete this, or do you want to? His face drained of all color. I didn't say anything. I just let the silence stretch. His eyes locked on the screen, lips slightly parted. You recognize this? I asked. He didn't answer. This, I continued, was sent 6 months before I got kicked out. It was forwarded from my college application portal. The acceptance I never received. Still silence. I used to think I wasn't good enough, I said, voice even. I thought I didn't get in. That maybe I was always meant to fade into the background while you got the spotlight. Turns out, someone dimmed mine on purpose. Caleb swallowed hard. Henry, save it. I cut in, sitting back. I'm not here to hear your version. I'm here to let you know I saw everything. And I want you to sit with that for a second. Because you didn't just steal a letter. You stole years. Opportunities. My shot at a future that I had earned. He looked like he was about to speak, but I raised a hand. And the thing is, I continued, you didn't do it alone. Mom and Dad were in on it. They wanted me gone. You were just the eager little soldier who carried out the orders. Caleb looked down at his hands. But here's the thing, I said, standing slowly and circling the table. Despite everything, being thrown out, having my room taken, my car handed over, my college fund rerouted, I made it. I paused beside his chair. You're sitting in this chair because of the name on the door behind you. That name's mine. He looked up, eyes glossy. So what now? He said, voice barely above a whisper. You're going to humiliate me? No, I said simply. I'm going to give you a fair interview. Just like everyone else. That's how I work. Merit-based. His brows pulled together, confused. Almost hopeful. I let that hope sit with him. Then I stepped back toward the table, grabbed his resume, and held it up. But you're not qualified, I said, tapping the paper. You've inflated your experience. There are gaps in your timeline you can't explain. And our company takes resume fraud very seriously. It's grounds for blacklisting. His eyes widened again. Wait, Henry, please. I need this job. Yeah, I said, tilting my head. Kinda like how I needed that acceptance letter, right? He opened his mouth. I didn't care what was about to come out. Interview's over, I said calmly. I walked him out. No shouting. No scene. Just a cold hallway and the sound of his footsteps getting smaller. But that wasn't the end. The revenge wasn't just about denying him. It was about revealing him. You see, I didn't just find that email. I did a bit of digging. Turns out Caleb had also accessed my online FAFSA profile back then, deleted it before the submission window closed. He used my birthday to reset the password and changed the recovery email to my dad's. I found browser logs on our old shared desktop. I compiled it all. Then I sent a neat little file to the admissions department at Wilmore, labeled, Evidence of Academic Interference, former applicant Henry Carmichael. I told them I wasn't asking for retroactive admission. I just wanted them to be aware that their systems were exploited, that my application had been sabotaged from within my own home. They responded, apologized, said they were investigating. They also mentioned they had received multiple reports over the years of students with similar cases, and that mine had helped connect the dots. Then came the kicker. A week after Caleb's failed interview, I received a call from Wilmore's disciplinary committee. He'd tried to re-enroll through their online continuing education program. He'd been rejected. Permanently. They flagged his academic record. Blacklisted his name. I didn't celebrate. Not outwardly. But inside. It was the first time I felt peace. Not vengeance. Not spite. Just justice. But there was one final move. A quiet one. I wrote a letter. Addressed it to my parents. No return address. Just a plain white envelope with 3 simple lines. You kicked me out at 18 with nothing. 4 years later, your favorite son came begging at my door. I gave him exactly what you gave me. And then I moved on. Because sometimes, revenge isn't loud. It's not a spectacle. It's simply balance restored. And after all these years, I had finally found mine. 6 months after Caleb walked out of that interview room, I got a message through LinkedIn from a name I hadn't seen in years, Mom. The profile was barely filled in. No job listed. No smiling profile photo. Just a cropped image of her standing next to Caleb at what looked like a high school graduation. The message was short. We heard what happened. Please call us. Caleb's been struggling. We'd like to talk. I didn't reply. Instead, I sat on the balcony of my new apartment, on the 12th floor, with a skyline view and a breeze that didn't smell like mold or burnt ramen, and let the message sit there, unread. I'd already made my decision. By then, everything had changed. I'd been promoted again, senior IT manager. My team had doubled. I was mentoring junior analysts, hosting security workshops, even consulting for startups on the side. The trust fund? I finally closed it. Took the remaining balance, matched it with my savings, and started a scholarship fund, the Carmichael Second Chance Grant, designed specifically for students who'd been displaced, sabotaged, or denied support by their own families. I funded the first 3 recipients myself. Each one came with a story that hit too close to home. As for Jonah, he got back on his feet, healed up, and started his own mobile repair business. I helped him build the website and optimize his backend system. We still grab wings every Friday. Some friendships are just built to last. And my parents? They faded. I heard through a mutual acquaintance, an old neighbor, that my dad lost his second job after a failed investment, and mom had started freelance interior design, but mostly just complained about the housing market. Caleb was back home. No degree, no job, still acting like the world owed him something. They weren't villains in a movie, just small people who made small choices. But I was done letting their decisions define me. One Saturday, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in gold, I pulled out the old photo I'd kept, me at 15, standing in front of the Civic I'd worked so hard to buy. Grease on my hands, crooked smile, hope in my eyes. I looked at that kid and whispered, "We made it." Then I slid the photo back into the drawer and closed it, for good. That chapter was over. Not with a bang, not with a broken door or a shouted confrontation, just with quiet peace. And the knowledge that the best revenge isn't just living well. It's becoming someone they can never touch again.